Welcome to the Deep Dive. We unpack the big ideas from important sources so you get the essential insights fast. Today, we're jumping into Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's argument for abundance. This really frustrating idea that the amazing future we need is possible, but we're kind of choosing not to build it.
Yeah, the way they open the book is quite striking. They paint this picture of, the near future. Imagine vertical farms right in our cities, growing local produce. That frees up enormous amounts of land, letting forests come back.
And the science fiction elements feel almost real. They talk about star pills, medications made in zero-G factories up in orbit, curing addiction, slowing down aging. Sounds incredible.
Right. And the world around it is transformed too. Quiet electric vehicles, self-driving delivery drones buzzing around. And maybe the best part, a shorter work week thanks to AI and productivity gains. So you could, hop on a Mach 2 jet for a weekend trip, New York to London in 2 hours.
That's the potential technology offers. But here's the catch, the central thesis that's, maddening.
They argue the story of this century, so far anyway, is one of chosen scarcities. We have the ideas, we have the tech, but we just failed to build what we needed.
Exactly. Their core point is that this almost utopian future isn't just delayed, it's being actively blocked by our own systems, our politics. They argue we've ended up with this situation where the political right often fights against government action, while the left, sometimes through too much process, kind of hobbles the government's ability to actually do things.
Leading to shortages.
Yes, leading to real scarcity in critical areas like housing, energy, basic infrastructure.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to dig into that failure and explore what they call a politics of abundance.
Okay, let's start with maybe the most painful scarcity.
Yeah.
Housing and opportunity. The book makes a really strong point about the value of dense superstar cities, New York, San Francisco, Boston.
Economists find productivity there is like 50% higher for everyone. Doesn't matter your background or IQ. Cities are just innovation engines.
But if they're so great, why have we basically locked people out? That's the paradox. And what's really interesting is how rising costs created this kind of geographic gate. Historically, from 1880 to 1980, the income gap between states actually shrank. Why? Because people could move to high-income areas.
Right, mobility.
Mobility was key, but that convergence, it stopped, dissolved around the 90s.
And you see it starkly depending on the job. Like, a lawyer might still benefit from moving to New York. The salary bump covers the rent.
Yeah.
But what about a janitor? The book shows housing in those cities eats up over half their paycheck.
Yeah.
Low-wage workers are actually moving away from opportunity now.
Because the rent is just too high. And this housing scarcity, they argue, it's totally manufactured. Look at the numbers. The U.S. has, about 425 homes per 1,000 people?
Yeah.
Compare that to France or Italy. They're closer to 600. We just didn't build the homes. And the main reason, zoning laws, how they changed over time.
Right. Zoning started out pretty reasonably, didn't it? Early 1900s, keep the factories away from the houses. Makes sense. But after World War II, it kind of morphed into something else, an anti-growth tool, really, designed to protect homeowners' property values.
Yeah, protect the asset. And the Petaluma Plan in California in 1971 is the textbook example. They just capped new housing permits, only 500 a year. And that idea, that restrictive model, it spread like wildfire, especially in California and other expensive areas.
Which brings us straight to a really visible, really tragic outcome. Mass homelessness. The book pushes back hard on the idea that it's mostly about mental illness or addiction.
The usual explanations.
Right. They point out homelessness rates don't actually track closely with addiction rates. West Virginia has huge opioid problems, right?
Much higher than California, yeah.
But California has 6 times the homelessness rate per capita.
Yeah.
So it can't just be addiction.
Exactly. And that's where they use that great musical chairs metaphor. If you've got 10 people in 10 homes, everyone gets a place. But if you restrict building and only have 5 homes, someone's left standing. Individual issues, poverty, addiction, mental health, they might determine who is left standing. But the reason people are left standing is the lack of chairs, the lack of homes.
It's a policy choice.
Absolutely. A policy choice creating scarcity.
And the cost just proves it. Housing someone experiencing homelessness in San Francisco, it costs between $40,000 and $47,000 a year.
Wow.
Compare that to Houston. Houston has basically no zoning, builds tons of housing, almost 70,000 permits a year, versus SF's 7,500. In Houston, the cost is only $17,000 to $19,000 per person. It's just abundance versus scarcity right there in the numbers.
It's incredibly stark. So, okay, how did we get here? America built like crazy after WWII. What happened around the 1970s to put the brakes on?
Yeah, the 70s seemed to be the turning point. You had stagnant wages, rising inflation, and suddenly Housing wasn't just shelter. It became the main financial asset for many families, the hedge against inflation, especially with those fixed-rate mortgages.
Right. The 30-year mortgage became key.
So homeowners had a much bigger incentive to, well, organize, to push for stricter zoning, parking rules, anything to limit new supply and keep their property values high.
And at the same time, you had this really important but complex environmental movement gaining steam. Between 66 and 73, we got landmark laws, Clean Air Act, Endangered Species Act, NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, good laws, needed laws.
Definitely needed, yeah, to stop reckless development.
But then came the California version, CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. After a court ruling in 72, Friends of Mammoth, CEQA's requirement for environmental impact reports got applied super broadly, not just big public projects, but almost any private project needing a permit.
Okay, so it expanded massively.
Massively. And here's the critical part, the mechanism that causes so much gridlock. These laws, NEPA and CEQ, they didn't just mandate studies, they created veto points. They gave anyone, neighbors, rivals, anyone, the power to sue.
Ah, so weaponized the process.
Exactly. It forces developers into potentially years of lawsuits, huge expenses, even for relatively small things. It just chills construction.
So the delay itself becomes the policy tool.
Yeah.
It's not that we can't engineer things. It's that every decision gets bogged down in legal challenges.
Precisely. And you see this paralysis most clearly with big, ambitious projects. California High-Speed Rail, right.
Oh yeah, the poster child.
Been going for over a decade. Still stuck somewhere between, as they put it, political fantasy and physical fact. Apparently, the engineers complain more about legal hurdles than actual engineering challenges. Like, it took 2.5 years and multiple lawsuits just to acquire a mini storage site needed for the route.
A mini storage site. This tells you everything. It's not about the engineering. It's the process, the institution. And that delay isn't free. It adds, 2 to 5% to the cost every single year. Inflation, rising expenses. It just balloons.
It spirals. And this connects to the economist Mancur Olson's ideas. He talked about how stable, wealthy societies tend to accumulate organized groups, environmental groups, business groups, homeowner groups, and they also accumulate complex rules and regulations. More groups, more rules equals more veto points. Collective action becomes incredibly difficult.
And the U.S. system makes it even worse, maybe, compared to Europe.
That's the argument. In Europe, often a central bureaucracy handles these tough decisions. Here, we often default to judges and lawsuits. The book calls it adversarial legalism. It's a system that rewards insiders who know how to work the process, and it makes government seem incredibly slow and ineffective.
Not too small, just too slow. Paralyzed.
Exactly. And look at the result. Public trust in government. It was around 77% in 1964. By 2023, just 16%.
16%.
Yeah.
Wow. That feels like the ultimate consequence of choosing scarcity, building a system that can't deliver.
It's a devastating number. And this paralysis, this risk aversion, it doesn't just hit construction projects. It affects science, too. Which brings us to Katalin Karikó.
The mRNA pioneer.
Yeah. Decades of brilliant work, but she kept getting grant rejections from the NIH. Relentlessly.
Why?
Her ideas were seen as too risky, didn't have enough preliminary data. The system favored safer, incremental science, not the big leaps. It's called the Karikó problem.
So the system itself discourages breakthroughs. That really underlines the point that invention isn't enough, right? It's implementation that matters. We love the myth of the lone genius, the eureka moment, but that ignores actually getting the thing built and used.
Absolutely. Penicillin is the perfect example. Discovered in Europe, but it kind of stalled there. It only became a world-changing medicine because the U.S. government stepped up during World War II. They figured out the mass production, the chemistry, the scaling, the micro-inventions needed to make it work.
The government solved the implementation problem.
They did. Same with Edison. His genius wasn't just the light bulb. It was the whole system, generators, wires, sockets, meters, making electricity useful.
Okay, so if that's the history, then Operation Warp Speed for the COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
That was like the modern version, the antidote to this paralysis.
Exactly. OWS provided a super clear goal. Get a safe, effective vaccine out before the end of the year. Singular focus.
And massive government backing.
Huge investment, yeah. Plus, those advanced purchase orders, what they call pull funding, the government guaranteed it would buy the vaccines, which took the risk away from the companies and let them move incredibly fast.
And it worked. I mean, the speed was unbelievable. 48 hours from genetic sequence to vaccine recipe, fastest vaccine development ever, saved millions of lives. It showed the state can still do big things when it's focused and uses the right tools.
It really did. And we urgently need that capacity now for energy. We know solar costs plummeted like 15% a year for decades. Incredible progress. But U.S. deployment actually slowed down after the Reagan administration cut federal solar R&D in the 80s. A huge mistake, looking back.
Especially now with AI taking off. Energy abundance is becoming critical. Those AI data centers. They're projected to triple their share of U.S. electricity use pretty soon.
Yeah.
If we don't fix the bottlenecks slowing down clean energy, the permitting, the transmission line fights, those AI companies will just build elsewhere.
Right. Taking the innovation, the jobs, the capacity with them. Energy abundance isn't just environmental anymore. It's fundamental economic policy. National security, even.
So wrapping this up, the book calls for a fundamental shift, right? Adopting an abundance lens.
Yeah, moving past scarcity politics. Stop fighting over how to divide a shrinking pie and start focusing on making the pie bigger for everyone.
Which means asking different questions, like what's scarce right now that should be abundant? What's way too hard to build that should be easy? It rejects both the kind of anti-immigrant scarcity arguments on the right and the degrowth ideas on the left that want to scale things down.
It's a call to reorient towards building, towards producing more. But the book ends on a slightly sobering note, reflecting on history. It points out this pattern. America often needs a crisis to mobilize. WWII spurred penicillin production. Sputnik led to DARPA and the space race. We seem to need disaster to focus so.
So the provocative thought for listeners is this. The scarcity we have now in housing, energy, even government effectiveness, it's self-inflicted. It's a choice. Do we treat these blockages, these CEQA lawsuits, zoning restrictions, scientific timidity, as the slow-motion crisis they represent? Can we muster the urgency of an Operation Warp Speed without waiting for catastrophe? Or do we just wait until things get truly desperate before we remember how to build again? It feels like that's the choice we face. Institutional renewal or just continued paralysis?